everyone. I am here today for a live with the fabulous Kara Simons from the Prairie Magical Oracle. Kara is the co-creator along with Amy Putney Koenig, excuse me, and I am so excited to chat with Kara about all kinds of fabulous. So just one sec, and we'll get Kara on here and then we can chat. Yay, I'm so excited. Hi, it's so good to see you.
Hi, you too.
I've been so excited about this. Oh my goodness.
I always like to chat with you.
It's such a pleasure.
Yeah.
I've got my handy dandy little timer here so I can keep track of the time and not get distracted.
Perfect.
By our wonderful conversation. So yeah, I was just introducing this fabulous, fabulous deck. Oh my goodness, it's one of my all-time favorites to work with. It's so lovely, and I've been looking forward to chatting with you about it for ages.
Me too.
I was just going to start by saying I've been following your work. Well, we've been friends for ages, but since the indie version came out, which was utterly fabulous, and then I was so excited to hear about your collaboration with Hay House for the mass market edition, which I have here. And with this, there's 4 new cards. So I was thinking maybe we could talk about the process of creating the deck in the very beginning with Amy and what that was like and how you connected and how this fabulous deck came to be.
Well, thank you for all those nice words. I just feel kind of lit up by the glow of your kindness and saying all of that. It means a lot that people in the deck community who are collectors like yourself and who really know decks, that it's resonated with you. You know, that's really meaningful because I know that you particularly make decks a part of your own self-care practice every day. So thank you for letting it be part of that daily thing for you. It means a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so to answer your question, there's a whole backstory that's in the guidebook. I always feel like paranoid people have heard it before, but if you haven't, the short version is that I've worked with animal energies a lot in my own just personal journey for growth and understanding my connection to the unknown. And felt these animals sort of knocking on the door and asking me to make a deck with them. And I resisted because, you know, I'm not an artist in that way. But once I finally gave in and said, okay, connect me to an artist, I met up with Amy in 2 days. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and she had been, she's a very well-established artist in the community here. She does amazing murals. She goes into schools and does the cutest, most amazing, positive, kind of affirming murals with kids where they participate in it. So she has a very distinct style and audience, I guess that's what I would say. And she had been getting all of these asks from people like, make a deck, make a deck. And so it just felt like this perfect timing for us both. And before we met, I just got this download of what the deck would be. And I got the tagline of Explore Your Sovereign Nature, because the deck is really a celebration of the prairie where we live. It's sort of like that, buy local or eat local, well, create from the local. And she had been having a dream where she saw the word sovereign. That was the only word she could make out right before we met. So it just felt like this really cool confirmation that this collaboration was going to be one that would be fruitful, and that was like that we had the blessing of the animals that were wanting us to work with them. Like, yes, you guys got it. You connected. You know, that was really cool.
Absolutely. And it sounds like there was a lot of serendipity for both of you in terms of timing and with the dream and all of the influence you were getting from all the different animal natures that you were working with for the deck. That's so incredible. I love it.
It was. Yeah. Amy is, you've had the pleasure of getting to know her a little bit, but she's just a cool person. You know, she's somebody who is she's truly able to hold like this unconditionality about the human experience. And she just has a lot of acceptance and compassion. And we've both had really different lived experience, but the first time we met, it was really cool to realize that we'd kind of arrived in a similar place of our for how we think about spirituality or nature or connecting with through dreams or through, you know, symbolism. We had a lot of shared ground, even though how we got there was really different. So I just feel so grateful that she's in my life now. We just had lunch last weekend and she's become a good friend. So it's just been a really big gift.
Yeah, huge. That's so incredible. And the
Yeah,
synchronicity of meeting someone where you're on the same page, like you said, you come to the project with different lived experience, but you somehow arrive in the same place where you can
yeah,
approach things in a similar fashion and feel that sense of cohesion. I feel that's part of any good collaboration. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Um, so what was the process like with creating the cards? Like, did you have all of the different animals laid out and then you talked about the designs, or like how did that work?
It was very organic. And I've
Yeah.
always been so grateful that Amy and I just sort of, we just left off the cliff. We leapt off the cliff together and we were like, let's do this. Sure, why not?
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
it felt like, I mean, you know, from working with the deck, one of the big core themes in the deck is that we all have an individual thing that we embody and that we can offer as part of our service as a gift to the collective that we participate in. But we have to show up and like own our gifts and own our authenticity and not like be ashamed of anything that is who we are. And it was a really cool thing for both Amy and I that we didn't really have a plan and we both completely trusted that it would come through. And
Oh,
so,
I
you
love
know,
you so much.
I just sort of waited. It felt like there were all the animals queuing up, and there's plants and elements and things too. Um,
Yeah.
but I just would feel them queuing up, and I would feel like, okay, this one wants to go. And sometimes I would get the verb first, sometimes I would get the questions first, and then I would sit with all of it and write it, and I would send it to Amy, and she would just come up with the card. So in the early days, we did have a lot of discussions because I felt strongly that the question and the verb needed to be on the card and kind of that composition. But she had a couple of different style ideas for how to do the art. So she showed me those and we kind of talked about it. But, you know, as we went through each card, it's really her. It's her genius. The whole idea of like, you can see how each being on the card, it's an outline. And that the
Yeah.
card itself, like the being itself isn't in color. And that's
Yeah.
such an interesting approach because her idea
Yeah,
was like
absolutely.
wanting to invite the viewer in to like fill that
Mhm.
color in themselves, but yet
I
there's so
love
much
that.
vibrant color on each card. Um,
Yeah.
so
Do you
yeah,
know that's something
that's
that I hadn't actually noticed until you mentioned that right now?
right,
The
right.
cards are so colorful that I didn't actually notice. This sounds ridiculous
I
probably
know.
because it's so obvious to me now, but I didn't even notice that the
Yeah,
animals were black and white until this minute. And I've worked with this deck extensively, as you know.
right.
That's so cool. I love that because it really does pull those images front and center, right? Like they're surrounded by this beautiful,
I
vibrant color, but it's, oh, that's so amazing. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Oh,
And
that's so cool.
she's such a she does a lot of collage work. And so I
Yeah.
really like that on some of the cards you can see a photo behind the being,
Mhm.
or sometimes it's just the illustration. But you know, every
Yeah.
single part of it was intentional. Like when she would send me a new card, I was always like, okay, I know that you did this symbol on purpose. Like, what is like?
Yeah.
It was really cool to get to see
Oh, that's
how that came
amazing.
together. And I think
Yeah.
we both felt like working on this gave us both more confidence in what we were doing because we both really trusted the other person's contribution completely. So,
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so magical when you have that process of trust between two
yes.
creative people,
Yeah.
because there's something so vulnerable about putting something that you have created so intimately out into the world. Like your
So, there
beautiful words
it is.
in this guidebook. Oh my God, they bring me so much solace. Like, honestly, this is the card deck that I reach for if I'm having a low day or if I'm feeling like I need, it feels like a gentle, warm hug. And your beautiful words are always so uplifting to me. And it always has, yeah, yeah, that's right. It's like the wallpaper behind you where the tree is white and black with
Oh,
the
yeah.
color around it. That's so beautiful. Similar symbolism with the birch trees. I love it. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much comfort to be found. And I love, as you said with each of the cards, you've got the verb, you've got the animal, and then these beautiful questions.
Hmm.
So I find like even if I don't have the guidebook readily available, because sometimes it'll take a walk with me around the house, because
Right.
I usually pull cards in the morning and then find time to write and post whenever I can in between doing things with the kids. So sometimes that's upstairs, sometimes that's downstairs. So the book will sometimes take a walk. But even if I don't have it at my fingertips, I can get so much meaning from the cards
Yeah.
themselves that it's really, really lovely. I mean, it's so beautiful when it's supported by your gorgeous writing. But there's so much to each of these cards, and I just love that, as you said, there's little symbols and little elements that Amy has so beautifully incorporated that really bring rich meaning to the cards. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
then you
thank you.
guys were also approached by Hay House to make a mass market edition, and I was so excited to hear that because I know as a two-woman shop, as it were, trying to pack everything and ship everything and coordinate that side of it while also being a mom and working part-time. I mean, it's a lot.
A lot.
This one is Bison, and it's B, and it says, "How can I know myself as absolute?" It's an absolutely beautiful card. Glimmer Melissa, I think, just asked about this one. I think it was this one.
When we were working on the cards at the very end, Amy added that flower and the
Oh
crown.
my goodness.
They're
Oh, I
like,
love that so much.
I
It's
just
so
love he's
sweet.
like a dapper dandy bison.
Yeah,
I love him so much.
yeah, he's totally extra with that beautiful
Yeah.
flower. I love it. Oh, that's amazing. So then, when you started working with Hay House, you included 4 extra cards with the deck.
Mhm, mhm,
So what was that process like revisiting? Because the other thing I wanted to touch on, there's 4 distinct categories.
mhm.
So, which is really amazing, and they're all color coded too, which is so special. And so, okay, I'm going to go backwards here. I need to be more organized, but I was just wondering, what was that process like of setting up the categories with each?
You know, it wasn't intentional. Again, it was something
Okay.
where I had a feeling, and so did Amy early
Yeah.
on, that something might shift. Because other decks that I've made, I love categories, I love layers, I love having structure. But I didn't set out with these categories in mind or with a plan. But when we were close to the end of the deck, and I was just printing like little copies at a local printer just to be able to play with them, and it
Yeah.
suddenly struck me like, whoa, these are already like evenly dividing themselves into perfect, you know, even categories. And so
Yeah.
at that point, some of the early cards that I had been sharing just had, Amy would just do a color at the bottom of whatever worked well with the art. And so
Yeah.
that was something that she went back through and changed once I was like, there's categories, we got to do this. And so then that became a really easy way for people to know which category. So yeah,
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
and they work together so beautifully, and you can integrate them. But if there's one particular area that you want to focus on, then you can
right.
let color be your guide and draw all the cards from that particular section and see what the message is, right? And that's so
Right.
beautiful. It can be integrated holistically or separated by theme, which is so amazing. And then there's also, you have these gorgeous 4 extra cards as well, which I absolutely love. They're so stunning.
Yeah,
So what was the process like creating these ones separate from the
sure.
rest of the deck?
Well, again, that was something that sort of happened organically towards the end. When we were talking with our printer and figuring out the specs before the Kickstarter, we
Yep.
realized that we could actually add more cards because of the way they print. They can fit a certain number on a sheet. And so when our printer said, look, you can add 4 more cards and it won't change the cost. And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
this is brilliant because I really wanted to pull in those elements somehow. It
Yeah.
didn't ever feel like they were going to have a question or be like in a category. And so it felt like such a gift that opened this possibility. And of course, like, Amy uses a lot of sun and moon symbolism in all of her art, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And so I love that having those in the deck gives you just another way of using it. The way that I use them is I just keep them in my deck and I wait to see if one of them comes up. But sometimes I take them out, and after I do a spread, you can choose one of the 4, and it gives you a sense of like, how is this energy moving? Because something that's really important to me as a deck creator is giving lots and lots of hooks for people
Yeah.
to add and access. Like, I feel like each card is like a little, energy container that's physicalized through the art, but it's really the power of the intention and the translation of the energies that I feel, and that's held in the card. But how do they want to move out of the card for you? Do they want it to be like an internal process? Is it an outward expression? Is it something that is really coming from like your family on the other side, or your guides, or a star beings, or whoever? So I
Yeah.
really love that those cards are an easy way to pick up on that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to create a focus point for the reading.
Yeah,
And the images are just like the sun card is
I love
just,
that.
oh, it's so beautiful. And with the flowers and the moon, like this is beautiful too for moon cycles because you have the representation of the new moon or the dark moon and then full moon and can integrate that really beautifully.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love the use of black and white and contrast accented by color. Like even this is essentially black and white card, but then you've got the yellow circle. So it
yeah.
really pops that image, right? Which is so beautiful.
That's
Oh,
Amy's genius. I mean, she just has
yeah.
for how to like capture it through the visual, you know?
Yeah,
I just,
absolutely.
it was really cool to watch that progress for her, watch that process for her.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's incredible. Well, and I was curious, I'm going to go back to my question that I asked and then
Yeah,
rewind it. I would love to know what was involved with creating your new cards.
yeah,
Because I was so excited to see that you were adding an additional 4 cards to the deck. Like
yeah.
I worked so closely with the deck, and then to find out that there was more magic coming, it was so exciting for me. So what was that process like? Like revisiting the deck and figuring out
Sure.
what would fit in each of the categories, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you know, we ordered decks after the Kickstarter, right? And we were selling them pretty quickly and knew that we would need to get more at some point. This was before we made the deal with Chaos. And so it always kind of felt to me like there were maybe some other beings that, you know,
Hmm.
wanted to join in the party and
Yeah.
they weren't ready the first time around. And so I kind
Yeah.
of had that like vague feeling again.
Hmm.
And so when we had this opportunity to work with Hay House, and I was, you know, explaining the deck, and so I said, you know, could we add these 4 cards because I feel like
Yeah.
they're like ready. And
Yeah.
Amy had a little bit of a premonition about that, I think. So I wanted to show you on the river card, you can see this little frog. And
Oh my
both
goodness.
wondered, like she was like, I kept wondering if there would be a frog in the deck, and I kept hoping there would be a frog in the deck, but it just wasn't ever right. And the messages of the 4 new cards were ones that I really needed last summer from some stuff
Yeah.
I was going through, that they
Yeah.
were, you know, showing up at the perfect time for me. And so
Yeah.
we created them very quickly. Like as soon as we got the green light to add them, then it was a matter of like, here they are. Like, and I was
Yeah.
so surprised. I knew that I'd been feeling the frog and I'd been feeling the turtle. And so I was asking like, well, who are the other 2? And I immediately heard bobcat and walnut tree, which really, really surprised me. Um, the walnut tree isn't really a specific plant or I guess tree in the prairie ecosystem, but it's, you know, it's nearby. Like it's something that grows around here in Iowa. It might be, I don't know if it's in, I think it's in the Oak Savanna, which is like bordering, but it was
Yeah.
sort of like, that was very unexpected. The walnut tree was not on my radar. And that the surprise of it and having to trust it helped me to understand the message, which is
Yeah.
there's some things you know without having a rational explanation. And my background, I have in journalism and I also practice law. I'm an attorney part-time. And so those professions are so, they really hammer into you. Like you need evidence and you need proof and you need things you can, you know, show with your physical senses. And the walnut tree didn't really make sense from any of those perspectives to add to the deck, but I love the message. And it was like, I don't care if I'm not typically in the prairie. I'm a neighbor. I need to be in the deck. Like, so that was
Yeah.
really cool for me to get a chance to do that and trust it and to like work with the energies of the deck again. And I, you
Yeah.
know, if we hadn't gone with Hay House, we would have added some cards for a second edition or something. But
Yeah.
it worked out great. I'm really glad we got to do it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, yeah, that whole process of trusting your intuition and trusting those intuitive hits, even if they don't make rational sense, it's been a huge lesson for me as well. And as soon as I saw that card, I was like, okay, this definitely has some healing and some
Yeah,
nurturing for me in this particular area of trust
yeah,
and faith, right? Like it's
yeah.
sometimes hard to come by.
Mhm.
The first card that I pulled from this deck when I started working with it was, of course, the box turtle
Oh,
and fairy, and I just love the message. What
yeah.
is always mine? That's so beautiful,
Fine.
and it's
Yeah.
such a beautiful process of
Mhm.
engaging with that. You know, like yeah, it's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
sweet frog too. I think this was one of the set. I pulled a spread following that.
Hmm.
It was this one was part of it too, I think, and
Hmm.
it's just such. And I love that it was part of the river card as well. Like that's so
Yeah,
lovely that there's these little elements that are pulled into focus
right,
with the additional cards. That's so
right.
lovely.
Well, and it felt so clear to me when I was working with each card. Sometimes they would tell me, like, okay, I really, like, you'll notice in the guidebook, some of them say, like, hey, you
Mhm.
might want to check in with so and so. They might be a good partner through working with my energy. I just felt like I picked up on that. Not all of the cards felt that to me, but with the frog in particular, this whole idea of it's uncomfortable when we're changing, and that
Mhm.
sometimes life has taught us that when something is uncomfortable, it's wrong and it's bad and we
Yeah.
need to like abort and get out. But it felt like the
Mhm.
frog was saying like, hey, that's not always the case. And when you see me, it's an invitation to like stay and acclimate and get used to the water. You don't need to just jump out. And I love how that message goes so well with the river card, which is the river card is just about, okay, you can always, no matter what's happening, you can find some peace inside of you when you tap into that universal love flow from source, or creator, God, or however you think of it, you know? So I really like how those cards go really well together.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this soothe energy of the river really supports that transition metamorphosis of the frog as well, because as you said, it's often a very uncomfortable process. Like change is often really difficult.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge lesson for me, like learning to sit with it rather than just pull away or resist or hide, right? Because it's much easier to do that. But the growth is in that transformation, right? And so whenever I see this frog now, it's like a gentle nudge to embrace that and to sit with it and to navigate the discomfort, right? Because there's always something to be gained on the other side of that, right? There's learning to be had, there's growth to be had. It's that transition and that change isn't for nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So what's in your cup? I'm so curious. Cheers, by the way.
What's in it? Just some tea. I'm in my basement, and we have the air conditioning on because it's like in the 90s and it's crazy humid here.
Wow.
Like a heat wave.
It's warm here this week too. That's amazing. Yeah, sometimes inside the air conditioning can be actually quite cool. That's one of the hard things about summer, I find, is outside it's scalding hot and then you go inside and you freeze with the air conditioning. Right. So you're finding that balance.
I know, I've got the window open and some tea, so I'm finding equilibrium.
Yeah, that's awesome. I made some matcha, so cheers.
Perfect. Cheers.
Yeah, it's going up to 21 Celsius later this week. So I'm always trying to do the translation into Fahrenheit. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but
I don't know either.
Quite warm, like very warm, like go outside without a sweater or anything, kind of warm. So it's my son's birthday on Thursday, and it's supposed to be 60, so we'll be able to go outside and spend some time in the fresh air. So that'll be nice.
Yeah, really nice.
So I also, before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you too about Songs of the Grandmothers.
Yeah.
Your amazing new collaborative project with Mari in the Sky. I can't tell you how excited I was when I heard that you guys were collaborating on that. Her art style, oh my goodness, the Gentle Tarot is also near and dear to my heart. It's the other deck that I reach for when I need a little bit of TLC and some gentleness. And the thought of the two of you collaborating was just so exciting to me because there's a similar energy I feel in your approach to your art and your writing and everything. And I know the Song of the Grandmothers is something that you had already created, and then you're going back and reworking the art for it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. So I created a deck. It was the first deck I ever made 5 years ago, just sort of on a whim, mostly for myself. And like I said, I'm not an artist, so I used photos. I called it the Grandmother's Oracle. It had 44 cards. And it's still the deck that I use for myself the most, even more than the Prairie deck. Like when I think because the grandmothers they're just so personal to me. Like I feel like I have this relationship with each of them that they've helped me so much. And so as Amy and I were doing the Prairie deck and having this fully realized project with beautiful art that like actually captures the energy of what I feel and like shows it to someone else. I started wishing that I could do the grandmothers again, you know, that I could work with an artist and bring it to life in a way that would really hold that energy for someone. And I sort of would put out feelers here and there and kind of follow threads, and they all just sort of petered out. And I met Marty that fall that she was doing the Gentle, well, I guess she did the Gentle Tarot in summer. We did our Prairie one in November, but I got to know her through a small group of us other deck creators that we sort of like started messaging on Instagram and helping each other, and then moved to Facebook. But she just became a friend, and I had such great respect for, like you said, her process, the way that she connects, the way that her art comes through. And so I worked up my nerve to ask her if she would illustrate this for me, and I still can't believe she said yes sometimes, because it's just a dream to have an artist with her level of skill. And just she and Amy have such different styles, and I feel like her art is just the perfect style for this deck. And prior to talking to her, I started feeling this crocodile energy like walking with me and like grinning up at me with all these teeth, and I was like, what, why are you here? You know, it was a little bit scary.
Yeah.
I started to understand that she was an ambassador of another category of grandmothers, the destruction grandmother. And
I
so
love
her
that.
card is about making peace with death, that it's always walking with us, but we don't have to fear it and we can make peace with it. So
Yeah.
the original grandmothers has categories of self-love, harmony, growth, possibility, and they're color-coded because that's my jam.
Yeah.
So then realizing that, oh, okay, if we're trying to look at the full spectrum of life, that you've got birth and destruction, creation, death. I
Yeah.
mean, it's all part of the same circle. And
Yeah.
so it was such a gift to realize that I'd been missing the weight. And it feels like the destruction grandmothers, I kept asking, like, are you sure that's what you want to be called? Because I don't want to freak people out. And it felt like, well, that's kind of the point, that we
Yeah.
want to offer people a more neutral version of that. And so they all kind of filed through really quickly, and then had a similar realization a few months later about another category called the service grandmothers. And so now I feel like it's this beautiful cycle, and no matter where you're at in that cycle, there will be grandmothers that can pop in and out and help you with it. So that deck has 66 cards, and that I also realized, okay, it needs this new name, and I've written a haiku for each of them, so it's on the card.
That's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it's been so fun to work on it and to see it just be realized and physicalized. Like, I feel like they finally look on the cards like how they feel to me, and
That's
that's just
amazing.
so cool. And Marty is just beyond talented. So
Yeah. And how amazing too that you happen to find exactly the right artist for each deck.
oh
Because
yeah,
Prairie Majesty has a very distinct feel to it, and there's a sense of
absolutely.
whimsy and play and
Yeah.
fun and nurturing. And
Mhm.
then with Mari's art, this is actually her
I was noticing that. It's so pretty.
design. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I love it so much. Anytime I do anything downstairs, I always have it behind me
Perfect.
in the zone. But her art has its own really unique feel as well, which is sounds perfect for the spirit
Yeah.
of the grandmothers. That's so gorgeous. And I love that you've added that destruction component because I feel like it balances things out really
It does.
beautifully.
Yeah.
The tarot would not, the major arcana would not be what it is without the
Mhm.
tower card, the death card, and the
Yeah,
devil card because that's part of our experience as humans.
absolutely.
And we need
Yeah.
to engage with those sometimes destructive forces in order for the rebirth and the renewal and the healing to come in, right? If you push those things away and don't deal with them, which I feel like we as a society tend to not want to deal with death and
Mhm.
not want to deal with those hard parts and kind of push it away, not deal with it. But
Mhm.
if you do, if you open yourself up to it, there's so much to be had and so much to be experienced. And you don't appreciate the beautiful things in your life if you don't experience the hardship. As much as I'd love to go through life without ever having to navigate that, it's not realistic, right? So it's,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and it was cool to realize too that because I have created a prototype deck that's still all photos, but it has all of the new categories. So I use that in reading for other people and for myself because I want
yeah,
a chance to keep working with them in that way. And it's been
yeah,
really cool to see that the destruction grandmothers, they absolutely touch on the difficult things, like you said. But that
mm,
sometimes when they show up in a reading, it's like, hey, you're at the end of this hard period. Like, the
yeah,
sometimes signify the death of something that you want to die, that like a hard
yeah,
thing you've been going through or a challenge you've been trying to overcome. For me, I have so much self-doubt, and that feels like an ongoing thing. And I was thinking today before our call how, in creating projects like this, I don't create them because I've achieved some level of mastery with it. Like, in many ways, I'm creating these because these are the messages I need.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's how I connect with these different beings typically, is them showing up and helping me through something. And then I want to capture that in case it can be a signpost for someone. But,
Yeah,
most of the time I'm creating out of the pain and the
yeah,
discomfort and the self-doubt and the shadow, and that that is that's a real thing. You know,
yeah,
I never want to give this impression like I've arrived and I've now got all this wisdom to dispense, because I don't think that's the case. It's just,
yeah,
this is a particular thing that's come through me and helped me, and I want to like
yeah.
physicalize it so it might be of service to someone.
Yeah, and you're speaking through your lived experience.
Right.
And I find so often that when creators such as yourself put something out in the world that fills a need for them,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much power in that because you're speaking from something that you have intimately experienced and that you have knowledge of. And it, I think, helps people know that they're not alone. Like often when I write my tarot posts, I'm like, oh, is that too much? Should I have, edited that? Should I not be so, vulnerable, whatever? But
Mm-hmm.
I found so much solace in reading other people's posts when they are open and honest about their experiences, and it makes you feel less alone. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? And there's something so comforting in that experience. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you're bringing so much of yourself into the work that you do. I mean, there's so much of yourself in this guidebook. I mean, every time I read your words, it's just like I can hear your voice coming
Oh,
through, And I love that you're incorporating so much of that experience because I certainly deal with imposter syndrome every day of my life. I deal with the same insecurities, not same. I mean, our experiences are different, but
right.
that insecurity and self-doubt is something that's very familiar to a lot of people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you're bringing that to the table through this beautiful medium is so helpful and so healing and so
Yeah.
nurturing, I feel, for people.
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot wait to work with it. The preview cards that you've shown on your account are just, I knew they would be, but they're so
There,
incredibly
there's
stunning.
so many that we haven't shared yet, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for people to see these because sometimes she'll send me new art and I'll just be in tears because it hits me in the same place, you know?
Yeah.
And when you were mentioning how they feel different to you, that was something that became even more clear to me in working with this deck because
Yeah.
the prairie cards really feel to me like doorways. Like each one is a little doorway, and there's an active verb on each card, and there's a question, and it's like, hey, you're being invited to go into that, but you have to open the door and you have to
Yeah.
take an action of some kind. Whereas the grandmothers, each card has a noun and a haiku. And so in pulling those cards, to me, it feels like they're asking you to be present with that emotion or feeling or circumstance. And it's like each card feels like a little womb where it's like, okay, you're being held in that. Here's some advice or comfort or
Yeah.
encouragement. But I'm so excited to have like the fully realized versions of both and be able to put them together. Like, I
Yes.
can't wait.
Oh, that's going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very different feels for
Mm-hmm.
both of them. But I
Yeah.
think they work beautifully together. Like
Oh,
just for
yeah.
one of the visuals and the energetics of them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the decks that you create I've said this about a billion times over the course of this call, but they're so nurturing and they're so
Oh, thank
comforting.
you.
And there's a sense of being held and being safe and being protected. And in the best possible iteration of a relationship with a grandmother, that's what it is.
That's what
You
it is.
have someone who is giving you that sense of comfort and stability and safety
Mm-hmm.
and that feeling of being held, right? Which is so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
oh, that's
Thank you.
wonderful.
I'm really touched to hear you say that. My intention realized, so it means a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
um, a last question for you, because we just reached a half an hour, but what was the process like writing each of the guidebooks? Like, how did the process of writing this one differ from the grandmother's? And did you find yourself going back and changing what you'd written already for the initial deck, or did you keep a lot of it, or what was the process of that?
Well, I'm in the process of it right now with so I do feel like when I went back and reread everything I had done before, there are a lot of things that feel like they'll stay.
Mhm.
That when I went back and read it, it felt like each of them felt distinct still. But
Yeah.
just in the course of me using the deck and doing readings for so many people with it, I've come to understand a lot more deeper layers of each of the grandmothers. So I do
Yeah.
think even all of the ones where I keep some of what I had before, there's definitely a deeper expansion. There are some cards where I felt like I always felt like I missed the mark a little bit in the guidebook, like that there was more to it that I just couldn't quite get yet. And now I feel like I'm seeing it more. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm also approaching it a little differently where, I mean, there's a haiku for each one that will be in the guidebook, but I've started writing a quote from the actual, like me sitting with like, okay, grandmother, if you could speak directly from your voice, what would you want to say? And it's been really cool. I've not done very many of them, but it's been powerful and kind of emotional for me because I feel like
Yeah.
it's stuff that I need to hear too. So in
Yeah.
the
That's
guidebook,
amazing.
there will be sort of a quote from that grandmother, along with a description of different ways to interpret the message or how to apply it in your life.
Oh, I love that so much because
Yeah.
books sometimes it's nice if you're short on time or if you're just looking for something succinct to
Mm-hmm.
focus on in the card. I mean, there's the phrases in the Prairie Majesty, but then I believe, yeah, there's like a highlighted line for each of the cards. And I
Yeah.
love that because it allows me to pull my focus. Like for the elk, it's let your knowing lead you over the bridge and find out how strong you really are. And that's such a powerful message, right? It's like
Yeah.
digging into your own reserves of power and strength and not
Mm-hmm.
looking externally. I don't know about you, but for years I would always look outside of myself for validation
Sure.
and
Sure.
confirmation and, just that sense of being enough and belonging. But if
Mm-hmm.
you can find that in yourself, there's so much power in that, and
Yeah.
yeah, I love that you're adding those quotes for the guidebook because that's going to be
Yeah.
so powerful.
I
And I
think,
would imagine working with Mari's images would be really helpful as well to pull out new
yeah.
meanings or
Well,
new connections with the cards. Yeah,
it's actually been kind of neat that because the grandmothers are such a personal thing for me, that she's
yeah,
actually been wanting me to give her like some ideas and reference points for the art. And so that's
yeah,
given me I mean, that's not something I've done before. And it's
yeah.
been really empowering for me as another way to tap into that energy. So like, for example, one of the cards is grandmother time. And,
Hmm.
I think the original photo that I used was sort of this like mountain pass that looked a little bit with fog and kind of mystical. It's a card about surrender and about the power in the present moment. But as I just feel like working with Marty has given me permission to tap into this, visual sense of the grandmothers that I didn't necessarily do with the Prairie deck because Amy had always had a distinct idea and I trusted that completely.
Yeah,
So with the time card, getting this, looking at photos and getting ideas, and so the idea that came to me was having I found this great photo where there's like mountains on either side of a lake, and then there's a mountain behind, and to have like a mirror image going on the northwest or the north-south axis, but also on the east-west, that it could be a picture. And then inside the lake, it's like there was a stone that was just dropped and there's ripples going out.
I
You
love that so
just
much.
finished that card and I'm like, this is so much better than I ever imagined. But it's been so cool to realize that
Yeah,
um, that's something else that I can draw on, because I feel like now when I sit down to rewrite that guidebook, having
mhm.
gone through the process of like, how do you want to be visualized, gave me a new understanding of her. And so that's
Yeah,
a gift, to be able to have the space and encouragement to do that for this deck has been really cool. And just her
absolutely.
use of color and her choices about, some of the simplest brush strokes that sometimes are just like a slant of light coming through. She just
Yeah,
has that skill of highlighting something, and it looks so simple, but it has so much nuance and meaning. I'm just in
oh,
awe. Like
absolutely.
every time I get a new card, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I cannot wait to work with this deck. I
Yeah,
mean, you guys are a power duo. I mean, I can't even tell you. I'm just so excited. I'm so in awe of Mars' beautiful work and your
yeah,
beautiful writing, and the thought of that coming together is just so exciting for me because
yeah.
it's great,
Well, and
great
she's going to be
combination.
doing a companion oracle deck herself that will be going along with the Gentle Tarot for next year. And so I
Yeah,
feel really excited to see how that's, because I use the Gentle Tarot a lot too. And so I'm excited to see how her oracle deck comes together and how it's all like within that beautiful Gentle Tarot world that she's created. So yeah, just something else
absolutely.
to look forward
Oh,
to from her.
that is so exciting. Yeah, I knew that was in the works, and I
Yeah,
honestly cannot wait.
me
There's
too.
certain artists that I just, whatever they create, I'm there for it. And
Mhm.
that's so exciting. It's so, so exciting. That's wonderful. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so great. So when the deck comes out, are you launching that as a Kickstarter or what format is that coming
Yeah,
out?
we're doing the Kickstarter. And the beautiful thing about a Kickstarter is we get to decide the timeline and we get to
Yep.
decide like all the details of it. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm excited that we can do just this really beautiful package of everything. And, I really did love on the indie version of the Prairie deck guidebook how I was able to do those colored tabs. And I'm
Yeah,
hoping to do that again for the grandmothers. Like I have a vision for that. And Marty
amazing.
has this amazing idea for the card backs, which I can't wait to see come to
Oh, that's
life.
amazing.
Yeah, because card backs are a big deal. They really define the deck. And
I love this one, by the way. It's
I do
absolutely
too.
stunning.
I do too. So I'm excited to see how that all comes together, and yeah, planning to do a Kickstarter later this summer and just take it from there.
So exciting. Oh my goodness. Well, I cannot wait. And thank you so much for chatting with me about your amazing projects. Like, I have the utmost respect for everything that you create, and for Amy and for Mari, and the fact that you're all working together just gives me the warm fuzzies. Like, it's such an amazing combination of creative, talented people, and it's beyond exciting.
Well,
so,
very kind of you. Thank you. And thank you for everything you do. I remember when we first connected, and just being so grateful that you give so much love to the indie deck community, especially, and helping people to get their decks seen and showing them like real practice and real use and real love so that other people can see what they're like. That's such a thing that you do. So thank you.
I feel so honored to get the opportunity, to be honest. Like, my eldest is getting really into art and creating different things, and I'm in awe of what she can do, because I excel at maybe stick figures. I'm more of a writer than I am an artist, so I'm just so in awe of this creativity that it exists within our community. Indie, mass market, all of it. It's so incredible to see the sheer amount of talent that exists, and how it's being put forth, and how each deck is so unique and has its own gift to give. I don't know about you, but I find if I'm in a certain headspace, I'll reach for a specific deck, and if I'm in another, there's certain decks that I look to for shadow work. There's other decks that I look to for some TLC. And it's just so magical that we have all of that within our community, and it's so accessible. Like, I think back to tarot, 10, 20 years ago, and it was a very different environment in terms of accessibility and everything else. So it's really lovely that there's so much to be had now.
It's exciting. I love to see new decks coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining me. This was an absolute pleasure. It's always so lovely to chat with you.
You too.
And I'll have this saved to my IGTV. So anybody, or I don't think IGTV even exists anymore, but I'll have it saved to my account. So if anyone missed the chat, then it will be readily available.
Awesome.
So.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you asked, and it was just wonderful to talk to you.
So lovely, as always. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
You too. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.